You've eaten Gotham's wealth, its spirit, but your feast is nearly over.
This is not black hole. It's an operating table. And I'm the surgeon. Why aren't you laughing?
From this moment on, none of you are safe.
Welcome to the Batman Book Club, a podcast exploring the Dark Knight Library. I'm your host, Ryan Lauer. The Batman Book Club is a proud member of the Batman Podcast Network, hosted by Batman on Film. Just go to batmanonfilm.com, click on podcast, and you'll find the Batman Podcast Network that has a whole list of other Bat-related shows that also like to dive into, that also talk about, there we go, other nerdy subjects that all of us love to frolic about, including Peter Vera. In our free time, Batman Book Club is also on Patreon. If you like what's going on with the show and you want to help support the show, keep the generators running in the Wayne Manor study, go to patreon.com/thebatmanbc. Thank you for listening to episode 206, Endgame. Joining me, as we just discussed, me and him, before we hit record, he's returning to the show, but it has been a long time. He is I really wanted to come up with something fun. I want to say the boss of Eric Carter on the Fire Rises podcast. It's Joe Fornarotto. Joe, welcome back to the Batman Book Club. Thanks for coming back.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been way too long, and I cannot believe it's been as long as it has. So thank you for having me back, Ryan.
Sure.
Yeah, I wouldn't say I'm his boss. I think he
You're not fooling anybody. You're not fooling anybody. We know what's going on.
No, it's a partnership, but yeah, I do like to boss him around a little bit.
There you go.
There's
Okay,
no
truth-
secret there.
The truth prevails. Okay. I could see you were trying to figure out something but we got it. We saw your hand.
It was
Joe, and
supposed
that's
to be
okay.
his show, and I kind of just snuck in there on like episode
Good.
4 and made it ours. So
Take
it was all part of
that,
the plan.
Eric Carter. Yeah, it's been a while, and you and I knew it was 150 episodes ago that you were on, and we talked Death of the Family, one of my absolute favorite Joker stories, and we knew that this one was coming, and for whatever reason, it's been 150 episodes until we've gotten back to it. But it's the name of the game of podcasting, I guess, especially with this show, on certain stories that aren't picked, and it's so long until it's picked, and it surprises me that this is one too of 206 episodes in, we're finally touching on Endgame. So hey, let's party.
Well, I think you knew I needed to come back for it, and you just didn't want me on just yet. So that's why we pushed it back.
Maybe that
a
was
little
it.
bit.
Yeah. You know what? Yeah, you figured me out. I can see through your games. You can see through mine, Jeff. All right. Well, let's not hesitate. Let's not stall any longer. I'm a little rusty here, I guess. Let's get to talking about Endgame. Now, obviously, this was released in the Legacy Batman title in the New 52 era that long ago in issues number 35 through 40. Release was in 2014 and 2015. Written by Scott Snyder, of course. Drawn by the great Greg Capullo, of course. And this story was available physically, digitally, in a collected hardcover and a collected trade paperback. Collected in the Joker Endgame hardcover volume and trade paperback volume. Collected in the Batman Omnibus number 2 from Snyder and Capullo. All the issues are available on DC Universe Infinite, and of course, it's available on my favorite app of all time, Hoopla. Basically, Joe, this is available wherever you go to read comics. This story is available. So which version did you read for this episode?
So I read the original hardcover, the Batman Volume 7
Booyah.
Endgame. And yeah, as we were learning as we were talking, I have not read the tie-ins for this book since it was originally released. I've only just read the actual Batman title. And just because, I mean, we'll get into it once we get into our initial thoughts and everything, but this was if you remember, this was a pretty big secret going in about what this story was
We're
going
gonna
to
get
be.
to that. Oh yeah,
Yeah, and
I
that's
got
my
some
favorite
kind
part of this
words.
story. Yeah.
Yeah. I surprisingly, so I have the hardcover that you do. I did not bust that out. Instead, I was buying issues. So with New 52 Batman, I was trying this thing of like, instead of double dipping, I was going to buy them digitally and then buy the collection when the physical collection came out. So
Hmm.
I actually bought all these issues on the DC app, which everything then migrated over to Amazon and all that stuff. And so I read the single digital issues, which actually was kind of fun because the last page was, advertisements for other stuff in the DC world. And I forget which issue. It was fun to see and a nice surprise. Yeah, issue number 36 at the very back. Batman, the complete television series now released on
Oh
Blu-ray.
wow.
So that was a fun, like, oh, look at that. So, those that was fun to see. And so those are like the fun parts I wish were included sometimes. Like the year one absolute included like the Denny O'Neil letters
Hmm.
that pertain to each issue in the back in one of those. And I'm like, I missed that. I really like some of like the questions, if they could be reprinted somehow in issues rather than just strictly pages only. Uh Something I wanted to ask you, I really wanted to go get my hardcover to check this. Did your does that volume 7 hardcover include the backup stories by Tynan?
It does not. No.
That's what I thought.
Yeah.
And I feel like I'm curious on if the death of the family physical, or if those single issues had a backup story as well. Sometimes I go
I'm
back and
almost
forth
positive
forgetting.
those did.
Yeah, and those also were not included in the hardcover, right?
That's a good question. I feel like I
Okay.
remember reading those a lot more than this,
Okay.
so they might have been included.
Okay, that's something I need to go back and check. But I knew one of them. I was like, I know Tynan did backup stories, and they're not included in a hardcover. And so
Which
as
was
I'm
the one that
reading
included
this,
Alfred? Alfred was the main backup in one of them. It was a whole Alfred story, wasn't it?
okay, not this one.
Okay.
No, this one was a doctor with Arkham and escaped patients. And each issue has each patient kind of telling a story about how Joker approached
Okay.
them in some kind of version. And
And I probably haven't read that since it came out.
it ends tragically as you'd
Shocking.
expect. Yeah. And it's a pretty good series of backup stories. So yeah, that was really nice to revisit here because I hadn't read that in a long time. And actually in issue number 35, that backup story, like I said, all of them are written by Tynan. There's a different artist on each one. The
Mhm.
artist on the first backup story, Kelly Jones.
Oh,
So
nice.
yeah, lovely. And then Sam Keith actually did one too. And I'm not a massive Sam Keith fan, but
Mhm.
his was actually pretty cool and looked good. So, uh, needless to say, so I listed all the versions. As you and I both know, there is an absolute death of the family coming in 2 months,
Yes.
and beginning of next year, there's going to be an absolute 0 year. It's inevitable. There's going to be an Endgame absolute, like right,
You
like
would have to
I
think. I mean, I was hoping it was just going to be included in Death of the Family.
yeah, that they just do
Um,
one, like his Joker
yeah,
saga or something like that.
because at this point, this is the only story other than Super Heavy that has not been made into an absolute or will
Yeah,
not be. It hasn't
yeah.
been announced anyway. I mean, but the whole Snyder Capullo run is collected, like you said, in every possible way you can imagine.
Hmm.
Like you can get these stories everywhere, and this is the one that kind of feels like I don't want to say if it's the forgotten one, but it's the one that doesn't have as much pizzazz as the
Hmm.
rest of them I feel because like even Super Heavy people talk about Super Heavy because it's a well-known story whether you like it or hate it. People are very um adamant on their feelings about that story.
Yes, they
And
are vocal about their
yeah,
feelings on
and like
Super Heavy.
even Death of the Family, some people are even pretty vocal on that about like the ending not living up to the hype, but the
Mm,
story itself was usually pretty loved up until that point. This one, I really don't hear people talk about this one a lot.
I don't either. And there's a couple images in here that I'll mention that I strictly do remember from this story. So I'm a little surprised too that this isn't one that's brought up, but also to each their own because it's like if I have to list 5 favorite Joker stories, this one won't make it. But that doesn't
No.
mean that I have negatives to say. So it's not doesn't mean that I don't like it, and we'll get up to all that. Do you remember when you first read this?
Yes, I do. And I have a very it goes back to that what we were talking about before about how this was such a shocking
Hmm.
story. But I first read this on my way to New York Comic Con on the train
Nice.
on my tablet. I had the digital version, and at the time we had no idea what Batman Endgame was about. And I
That's right.
remember reading this and getting really pumped for New York Comic Con. I used to go every year when I was,
Hmm.
back when this was coming out. And it was really cool to read that story, not knowing anything about what was coming.
Yeah, absolutely. I read this. Yeah, it was like as soon as it was available each day to buy and
Uh-huh.
download on my iPad, I bought it. I think I was working. Yeah, I was working second shift at that time, so I could read it before work, which was
Uh-huh.
actually, that was nice. I didn't have to wait. It's
Yeah.
like as soon as it's available, I can read it, rather than doing a like a long shift all day long and have to wait till that night or something. But yeah, I have one more question for you, then we'll dive right into the surprise part about it. But yeah, I read this every issue as soon as it came out. This was, day one reading material for me, as pretty much New 52 was the Batman title. And then easiest question so far for you, why Endgame?
Because Death of the Family is still fresh in our minds from the last time I was on.
That's right.
And
Yeah.
this was the obvious choice for the next time. Now, yeah, that's really why. It's just we covered Death of the Family. I think most of the other stuff from the Snyder Capullo run you've covered. I was
Yeah.
trying to think today. Have you covered all of Zero Year or at
All of
all?
it. Yeah,
Okay.
Tim Rooney came on. Oh my
I couldn't
goodness.
remember if you
Probably
guys just did a segment of it or the whole thing.
no, we did the whole thing.
Okay.
And that was pretty ambitious because I think that was still while I was trying to stick to like an hour.
Hmm.
Um, and I think I gave up because I'm like, you can't do this 12 issues in
Yeah.
60 minutes. It's like,
And it's like three big stories that like are
ah,
pretty different in that,
yeah.
and that I love that story. So but yeah, I mean, I do like this story. This
Hmm.
is not up there with Death of the Family for me personally,
Hmm.
but it is the natural sequel, if you will, to what we should cover next,
Yeah.
and what I was happy to come on here and talk about. So
Yeah. Absolutely. So it's somebody is probably unironically gonna choose super heavy one of these days. And I will enjoy going back to revisit because I haven't really read that in a long time.
so I will
And so
say,
to just to solidify, sometimes like it's fuzzy to me. I
mhm,
know I know I didn't necessarily okay, I've given it time. Like I've gotten a lot of Batman since then that maybe like it can go down smoother and I can have a little bit more optimistic thoughts of like I did like this part and this part I didn't like this. Like
yeah.
so if somebody chooses it one of these days and then I'll pretty much have covered the entire Snyder Capullo run.
So I went back recently and read that, and it works much better sitting down and reading it in one sitting because
Hmm.
you're not month to month going, oh, I want Bruce back. I want Bruce back. I want Bruce back. So like
Yeah.
when you sit down and read, it's not as long as I remember. For some reason, like in my mind, it felt like a long story without Bruce. And it's not. And it's actually a decent story. And there is a good amount of Bruce stuff there along with it. Him
Hmm.
coming back and the whole Julie Madison thing. I know we're not here to talk about super heavy, but I don't think I don't think it's gonna be as bad as you remember it because I wasn't crazy about it
Yeah.
either. And I definitely enjoy it more now looking back at it than they were trying something different. And especially after this story, um, between the court of other than the Court of Owls, Snyder Capullo's Batman run is very Joker centric. I mean, even Zero
Hmm.
Year plays a huge part into the Joker story.
Yeah. Um, so I guess with that being said, you've already said this is the sequel to Death of the Family. Death of the Family, let's see, I was trying to look up. We hadn't seen the Joker since issue number 17. So this is issue number 35. So you're looking at a year and a half since we've seen him. And mad props. I remember Scott Snyder was very active on Twitter back in the day. And he in I remember the lead up to this, and if you everybody knows that first reading this knows the first cover of issue, of this story, issue 35. Basically, it's a projected Green Lantern hand holding Batman as the Justice League member by members around him fighting him. And Snyder just kept saying, like, we can't tell you anything about it, can't tell you anything about it. So it was like, oh, okay, this is kind of in my mind was Okay, so it's a Justice League Endgame kind of story? Huh. Wonder what they're gonna do with this. So so if you read it on your way to New York Comic Con, had you been tipped off at all on that issue before you read it?
No, so that's what's interesting is I guess I don't know if I wasn't on Twitter yet because what year was this? This was 2000.
2014, 2014.
I think it was 14. So it's possible I wasn't really on Twitter yet, or if I
Yeah.
was, like, I just wasn't into it as much as I am now. Um, so it came out on a Wednesday back then, and I
Hmm.
was probably going up to Comic Con on Friday. So I made it,
You had
today,
two
2 days is a
days.
long time. But back then, 2 days and comic talk and, like, I don't know, I guess I wasn't talking to too many people that were into this at the time. Um, it wasn't like my wife was going to tip me off on what was
Yeah.
going on with this. So I just was like, all right, let me read the next, Snyder Capullo run and then start it.
Hmm.
And man, when I got to that last page, that was like a holy crap moment.
You
And
can say shit, Joe.
I wasn't sure. I didn't want to have to make it.
Holy shit.
Yeah, I mean, it was how today, unfortunately, it's not even that they couldn't keep it under wraps, they just wouldn't today. I mean, we
Yeah.
live in an era where they spoiled like Batman and Catwoman's wedding months in advance, and then they don't even end up getting married because it's all about marketing. It's all about selling the
Mhm.
book. And maybe it's just because Snyder and Capullo's run was almost like it was selling itself that they didn't have to do that, which is pretty
Snyder
cool.
had a lot of pull because this was also, I'm pretty sure during New 52 that I think he was behind DC was going to do the dollar price hike. And then he was really far behind of keep drawing the line at 299.
Hmm.
So I think, and he had the sales, he and Capullo had the sales to back this up that I think probably like what he wanted to do, he was allowed to do.
Hmm.
So if he says, do not ruin this. Um,
Yeah.
I just kind of feel like they were like, okay, yeah, we can keep the lid on it, and then that'd be a great, after first issues of arcs and stuff, first issues overall are always high, and they can kind of gradually drop. This would be
Yeah.
a great way of, okay, that first issue, let's build it up. How do we keep that momentum going? Well, now the cat's out of the bag, the clown's out of the box. For that next one that we can use it now as a marketing
Yeah.
scheme because we've already revealed, and so that's like, yeah. So my biggest like giddy moment, I think, with the story is that of them keeping it under wraps because
Yeah.
I did get that great, it's just like when we go to movies now and it's very much of like no spoilers, no spoilers, and you're able to go to a movie without anything spoiled and you get to experience it as as intended.
It's like going without even a trailer at that point.
Yeah,
Like
yeah, exactly.
the first issue of this story feels almost like a different book
Yeah.
because it's all the lead up into
It's a
Batman finding
it's a
out what is going on.
it's a Justice League story. He's fighting the
Yeah.
Justice League. What's going on? This is weird. Okay. Batman, this is so actually looking up Batman Endgame on Wikipedia, there's an interview that IGN had, and I should post it on the like the when I post this episode, I should put it in the thread because it's a
Mhm.
good read of an IGN writer got to interview Snyder about this, and it's a really good interview. And he even said something about like that, you as a reader, you're reading this and you're feeling, oh, this is Tower of Babel because
Mhm.
Batman is going after or they're coming at him, but he's
Yeah.
taking down each member of the league, because he has a backup plan because he's
Yeah.
Batman. He always does. And it's really cool him explaining his thought process behind all that. But then, yeah, like you said, the very last page, which is freaking awesome, is good old Superman. And you have a great buildup of Batman, mentioning about like, oh, not him or whatever. And then I guess right before the last page, you see each member start to kind of smile,
Mhm.
and then there's little Soups, the big old smile on his face, and no one's going to say save you this time, and then just a laugh, and he's next he's back, and we all know what that means. Like, oh, I got the Joker, got the total nerd freak out. Like,
Yeah.
what's going on? And then we got to wait 30 more days to find out what's next. It's like, but then what a great magic trick. And it's like, thanks, DC, for just shutting your damn mouth for, you know,
Yeah.
for a month, just not saying anything. It's a great reveal. And it's a bummer to anybody who knew well, anybody that came late to the game because Joker's on the front cover. You just showed it to me of the cover of
Mhm.
this collection is
Yeah.
Joker. This is a Joker story. And it's kind of like a bummer because it's like, some readers that weren't able to experience it at the moment. It's like, it's just a really cool thing that you don't get I feel like you don't get it that often, that much
And
these days.
it'd be really hard to pull this off today, just because
Yeah.
I feel like they focus too much on the sales, and Joker sells so well that
Mhm.
even if they have confidence in Snyder and Capullo even today, they still want to sell the product even more. And
Yeah.
yeah, I just, and it's funny, I don't remember what I was thinking as I was reading it, of like, oh, who's it going to be? Who's it going to be? I know Joker was definitely not even on my radar.
Yeah.
And it's also funny because, like you said, it was a year and a half without the Joker, which at the time seemed like a really long time. The Joker's been gone since Death of the Family. When
Hmm.
we read it now, though, and you think, well, it was a year and a year of that was 0 year. So,
Hmm.
in the context of like the storyline or like the timeline of Batman, it's not a long gap. And I
Yeah.
was trying to remember like what took place between the end of Death of the Family and the beginning of this in the actual Batman timeline, because
Yeah.
there's only a few single issues, maybe a two-part story in there. And that was what I was having a hard time remembering, because it's like, all right, how long was the Joker really away? Because they don't really touch on that too much on like an actual
Hmm.
time frame.
You had sent me something, and I remember coming across this too as I was looking stuff up online about it, and how in the Batman timeline, as you said, this takes place after Batman Eternal. And
Yes.
I was like, oh, and I'm like, well, Lincoln March, spoiler alert, doesn't show up in Endgame. And I'm like, oh, but I wonder. Sometimes it's just like, hey, if you're trying to figure out where to do things place. But I haven't reread Eternal since heck since it wrapped.
Same. It's a
It's
long,
been
it's
on,
like
yeah,
52 issues, I think. Yeah.
yeah. It's a long one. So there's that. I would have liked to have reread Arkham Manor because Arkham Manor plays into this too.
Hmm.
And I remember reading that, and I thought that was a cool story. But I also don't remember a whole lot of it other than the carryover with Eric Border, who we'll get to in just a second. And I feel, yeah, see, I'm gonna go back and reread that because maybe the doctor that's in the backup stories, she might be a carryover as well.
So Eric Border
Uh,
is introduced in Arkham Manor prior to
yeah,
this. That's where
yeah.
he's from.
I
So
th-
I
I
didn't.
think annual 2 or 3 is his introduction, and then he's in Arkham Manor, but he's not like I don't think he's front and center. Like,
It's like a
we were
casual
he's
thing. Yeah,
like we were waiting for the reveal of the Joker or anything. I think they
it's
how
subtle
they
enough
utilized
where,
him was pretty good of
okay,
like, okay, he's hidden pretty well in plain sight.
yeah, that's the hard part when you go back and I'm like, oh, let me just read this quick 6 issue story, and then it's
Yeah.
like, wait a second, all right, what does that mean? All right, let me go back and read this. And then it's like, before I know it, I got like 30 issues in front of me to read to make this 6 issue story make sense.
Yeah,
It's like, do I
exactly.
really want to do that?
Yeah, I'm like, I don't no, I don't like it when I have to do that
Yeah, I
because it's
just read the
starting to
whole
be
metal
work.
omnibus because of your last episode. Thank you very much. So
Blame Chris Clow. When he mentioned of that and he busted that out, I'm like, I can't do it. I just can't do it with metal. Sorry, I
I
can't do
haven't
that
done
one.
it. I haven't done it since it came out. So that was when I was really looking forward to trying to dive into, and I did accomplish it, which I was very proud of myself for doing.
Good on
Um,
you.
and it was fun. So I'm kind of on a Snyder Capullo run right now, which has been nice. Kind of
I
in a
mean,
weird time frame
that's
of
your
doing it
bread
though.
and butter too,
It
though,
is.
Joe.
Yes,
I
it
mean,
is.
Eric drinks from the well of Sean Murphy. You drink from the well of the Snyder Capullo, like the
Yeah.
Dionysium well, if you will. um, no, there's something that there is such a like a fun joy though to when someone does pick a story on this show that it's one that's like I revisit on my own time. And so it like that
Mhm.
those Snyder Capullo stories are ones I revisit on my own time. So yeah, this was like one of like it's actually been a few years. I'm like, yes. Like it's not hard homework 'cause it's like I remember the beats and this is like a joy to revisit. Spoiler
Mhm.
alert. I like this story. So yeah, that was like a relief, when we discovered like we're putting it on the books, we're recording, reread Endgame. So, um,
And it's a quicker read, especially after you just came
yeah,
off Metal, which is an exhausting read, even just reading the 6 issues.
my head still
Um,
hurts.
yeah.
It's been a month. My head still hurts on that one a little bit. In which this story, I think I could start to see a little bit, uh, quote unquote nitpicks of Snyder's writing
Yes.
starting to be more, um
Exposition.
Yeah, and more noticeable to me reading this one. And like I think this was starting to become like, okay, I'm really noticing here almost over explanation, like you just said, exposition. The really and it was like I said with on that metal episode with Clow of, well, he's proving that he's done the research. But for me, I'm starting to feel like it's slowing the momentum of the story, which that to me then says of like, oh, I think there's too much here. If you're slowing the momentum of the
Yeah.
story. And there was a
His
lot of that here.
when you tend to read most or a lot of his stuff in order or in a grand like in abundance, his
Hmm.
style becomes a little repetitive
Hmm.
and wordy. I mean, for lack of a better term, it
Yeah.
is very, exposition heavy. I was actually discussing it with Eric the other day because it's funny how um it seems like Snyder channels a lot of Grant Morrison. The
Yeah.
difference between the
That's his
two of
favorite,
them,
right? His favorite Batman writer too. Yeah.
yeah, and ironically, like me and Eric don't care for Grant Morrison.
Hmm.
It's just not our favorite writer. The difference between Grant Morrison and Snyder to me is that Morrison is more like he doesn't do the exposition. So
Hmm.
you'll flip a page and be like, how the hell did I get here?
Yeah.
Like, what just happened? Where Snyder will give you 3 paragraphs on how you got from this page to this page.
Yeah.
And you're like, well, why are you just telling me this? Can you show me?
Yeah.
And I'd rather have the exposition so I know what the heck is going on. I mean, I like a lot of Morrison stuff. I think sometimes his stuff can be a little hard to understand. It's like over my head, and I'll admit maybe I'm just not smart enough. But like I've read Final Crisis like 5 times. I still don't know where the hell Batman came from to kill Darkseid.
The Omega sanctioning. I
But like I don't even know where
I don't know.
Darkseid's. I don't even know where he is when Batman
I don't
walks
know.
in. I don't know how he got there. It is what it is. But Snyder would have given us 2 paragraphs to explain where that was and everything, and then
Yeah.
it ends up taking a long time to
You
read his
know,
stuff.
at least.
Yeah,
So yeah. Yeah.
it's a different style, but it does become like a routine where you
Hmm.
you're reading and you're like, okay, here comes the exposition, and it's fine. But when you read, 36 issues of his, like if you're trying to go through a lot of his run, it takes forever because
Woo!
there are a lot of words.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
But it's still
And
he's a good writer though. Like I
oh yeah.
like reading, and like you said, he puts in the research, he does the homework. There are seeds planted for stuff like 30 issues away in this book. Like it's crazy.
That is like that's such a strength of his. And you mentioned Morrison, and I do agree with that. It's a drinking game on the Batman Book Club that I will bring up that Batman RIP is one of the most frustrating episodes I've ever had on this show because I still don't know how I feel about that story.
Mhm,
The ride was fun and great, and then
mhm.
RIP kind of shit the bed, I thought, and left me very unfulfilled and like, what? Uh Snyder, for better for worse, however, whoever, however anybody feels about different parts of his run or whatever, he at least he took from, and something that he said before too from Morrison is like like basically if you want to put your stamp on a character or on Batman, he's got to have a beginning and an end, or maybe
Mhm.
he just said an ending. Snyder just like he builds on his own Batman legacy, and not really anything that hardcore goes against the year one, the long Halloween, Dark Knight Returns,
Mhm.
like the
He plays with it
finite
a little bit.
stories in
Yeah.
Batman lore, he doesn't mess those up.
Mhm.
I think his stories can still kind of fit in your own timeline. So I don't know how or when in my timeline Court of Owls exists, but it exists.
Yeah.
I don't know when exactly Death of the Family exists, but it exists to me. Here, he combines, like you just said, the Dionysium becomes a part of Metal. Well,
Yeah.
Metal was in 2017, 2018.
It was
Kind of forget.
2017.
Okay.
I just read it, and there was a
Okay.
Justice League advertisement in the one I was reading, so that's how I know it was 2017.
And so like this was 2014 and 2015. Well,
Yeah.
Metal is not a Batman title story. It's a Batman story, but it's out of like it's not part of New 52. So yeah, like you just said, this is like years ahead and he started to plant the seeds. In this story, he has like he builds on a big arc, I get, 18 issues ago in Death of the Family by bringing in Joker, but then he also brings in Court of Owls, which was
Mhm.
his first arc on this,
Yeah.
and it makes sense in a way of how how he brings them into the story.
Yeah.
And I think obviously, like I think Court of Owls is, an all-timer story. I don't need it's not like for my favorite Batman stuff. I kind of don't like that like Batman's just been completely oblivious to something else running it and almost
Mhm.
like we're allowing you to do this, Batman. That kind of conflicts with but it's like my Batman sensibilities, but it's still it works. Um
It's hard to
Snyder's like
balance having this huge villain and also have Batman not look like a fool. Like so
yeah,
like yeah.
yeah. I and I think like Snyder, I just like applaud like how he uses Court of Owls here because then it's like they're in to serve what they need to, and then it's out.
Mhm.
And I don't need a side like when they had what a Talon series that was part of New 52 or
Yeah.
something. I don't need that. I don't need Court of Owls being part of something on another title or anything. So no, Snyder, it's his creation. Let him and Capullo use it here where fear
Mhm.
is gradual and genuine. And so it's I guess just a long way of like Snyder. I think he just does a good job of containing, which is ironic because I like this story is the opposite of Death of the Family, where Death of the Family was small and contained, and this kind of blows it open
Yeah.
pretty pretty big. But it's still like it's a Gotham City Batman Joker story. I think to kind of go along with because so I can just maybe get like nitpicks out of the way. So we said the exposition, a lot of uh dialogue, which like it just depends on how it's written. On if I have a problem with it, and I say problem like with quotes because it's not like I'm sitting here like I have a problem with all these words, but there's like maybe it's almost like so issue one is like I can picture in my mind now thinking about it of kind of like oh that's him, he's having his nightmare again because he was exposed to Joker gas or not Joker gas, Scarecrow gas. And then he Alfred and Julia are in the newly acquired kind of like hideout that used to be the Court of Owls and stuff, and then he's fighting the Justice League, and then it's the big reveal at the end. And then the second one is him, figuring out how to help cure them from this Joker strain. Batman just going to the abandoned Arkham, and now you get the Joker. We see the Joker, and he's revealed. And then there's somewhere between like issue 3 and 4 where I'm kind of like, this was the exposition dump issue, I think. And
Mhm.
it might be 4 because the only images we
Is it
see,
the
and it's
crazy
one,
quilt issue?
I think so.
Because that's when a lot of the stuff is explained about
Yeah, and
all
that'd
the
have to be 4.
Dionysium
That
and all
wouldn't be
that.
3. Because 3 is so Joker knocks him out at the end of 2 and Batman awakes and the Pennyworths have, helped him come to the beginning of 3 and he's catching up just like we are of what's happened to
Mhm.
Gotham, in
Yeah.
which Joker has released this new toxin that I think is pretty clever, but it's explained to us rather than show
Yeah.
of like, well, it's making it so that everything that people love, they now hate. And that's kind of hitting the nail on the head, or like maybe a better expression
Like on the
of
nose.
Snyder's. Yeah, a little on the nose. Yeah, just a hammer right to the nose. Bam. Of what this story is of like, you get it? It's like love and hate because Joker
Yeah.
was the biggest fan, and now he's just like, you're meaningless and blah blah. He's turned on him now and whatever, and it's like, okay, I'll go along with the ride. But there's an image. See, the one bad thing about how I'm just going issue by issue digitally here is that it's a lot longer to just flip through. It's hit, scroll, hit. But in one of them of where Joker's swimming to the Batcave, that's
Yes.
imagery that I flat out remember from this. And that's like the only time we see Joker in that issue too. But it's really cool. I really like that, even though it's him in like a swimming tee and shorts and little goggles and everything, and he's doing is swimming, to get to the cave. But like it's kind of like cool imagery. And yeah, you're right on all of that of the crazy quilt, which is chapter 4. And that's also Joker swimming to the Batcave, so it's issue 38. But that was just see that one opens with Gordon's attack, So it's just a section, maybe not a whole issue, because something does happen in each issue. But I don't know. I just felt like there were moments there that did feel like slowed the pacing of the story.
And there are parts where like you could have a tendency, or at least I do, and I admit this is on me, not really the story. You could have a tendency to kind of zone out when they're getting the exposition heavy, where you're
Yeah,
like, oh, like I don't even know what's happening right now. I just want to get back to the fun stuff. And
I'm reading the words, but it's
but
not
I
running through and
yes,
digesting.
you realize you went through the whole page and you have no idea what you just read, and you
Yeah.
were on the page for at least 2 minutes, you know, like that
Yep.
kind of thing.
Yeah.
Because like there, I'll be honest with you, a lot of the stuff from Crazy Quilt, like I remember Crazy Quilt being in this, but
Hmm.
this time I really took my time and actually focused and paid attention, you know, consciously. And I'm like, wow, I don't remember any of this.
Hmm.
Where it you know again it's nitpicky because I do love the way Snyder writes, and I love how much thought he puts into it, but yeah, it can be a little much. The one thing that's funny is, like you said, with the Joker swimming, he's swimming into the Batcave, and the next time you see him, his face is like destroyed. And I
Hmm.
was like, wait, did I miss something? When did that happen? I remember I'm trying to remember if it was on Twitter or something where maybe Capullo said, well, that's the repercussions of all the traps in the Batcave. But you don't see that.
Oh,
You just see him perfectly fine swimming to the Batcave, unless it's in like one of the tie-in issues that I don't remember.
that's
Um,
true. Yeah.
but he literally is like burnt like half of his face
Hmm.
off. And I think that was their way of saying like he went through hell to get to where he was to confront Alfred. But you don't
Yeah. Good
see any
call.
of that happen. So
Yeah,
that's
that's
like
a good point.
that's one of those things where okay, that makes sense, but if I have to think about it, I don't want to think. Who wants to think? But
Yeah.
you know, but it's one
These are
like
comic books.
that's where I feel like okay, if I'm nitpicking you from giving too much exposition, but then I get to a point where I need something explained, that's where it's tough
Yeah.
because you can't have it both ways. Either don't explain it and expect me to just, you know, show don't tell. Um, but once it was explained, it was obvious to me. So I
Yeah.
feel like one little line of exposition there may have helped me,
Hmm.
but also or like I'll figure it out. I don't
Yeah.
know. It's because it's not that important. It's not important to the story. It's great
No.
imagery of seeing his face like that. I mean,
Yeah,
it's
and I'm on that page right now, and it is like it's striking. It's like this looks awesome. Like
yeah,
Capullo, you're like nailing it. Go figure.
yeah,
Uh
shocking.
yeah, exactly. On the positive note, from here on out, probably, unless anything pops in my head, I got out that like, okay, there's my negatives. To be totally fair on it. The When I found out this was a Joker story, after that, I was very excited because I've already mentioned, you and I have already talked about it, how much I love Death of the Family and how great I think that story is on the Batman Joker relationship, which is what I think the best Batman Joker stories are ones about their dynamic and their relationship. And we have it, ingrained in our heads many of the times that Joker is Batman's biggest fan. This story is kind of, it's sadistic in the sense of like Joker. Now you can see he's, as weird as it sounds, he's darker in the sense of like he's doing things not just for like the humor of Batman's reaction, and as I'm a fan, like, look at you,
Yep.
it's more so it's out of torment. And I know it had me hooked to just kind of like, man, where does this going? What's the whole point? And I mean, yes, no, Snyder takes the hammer to the nose a few times, but it's the love hate aspect of it all. But I like how they nail that home here. I think Batman has a lot of time of figuring out what it is to fill in that gap of we were left at Death of the Family unexplained. But Batman being so convinced Joker's dead because it was there's no way he could make it into the cave.
Mhm.
And then the fall off the cliff. Like he's done. And we discover the Dionysium, which is part of this new strain that's in this Joker toxin. And Batman's discovering of its, healing capabilities. And this is the explanation for how Joker survived. The Gordon looking up information, I remember how that towed that line where I started to get, eh, on his Joker, basically Ra's al Ghul, and he's centuries old. And I'm like,
when
I don't like that.
not only when he's looking it up, when Julie, is it Julia Pennyworth?
Hmm.
When she's looking it up and they're running, facial recognition software, that was one of
Yeah.
my biggest nitpicks is Batman's never done this.
Yeah.
That bothered me a little bit. Where it's like, come on, Batman's never run facial recognition through history to see if the Joker, but I guess maybe their defense is like, has it ever come up that Joker's um what do you call it? Immortal, like he never
Hmm.
thought to do that. Okay, I can go with that. That part did bother me a little bit where it was so easy for her to find his image in these past events.
Yeah.
But again, it's a nitpick. It's one of those things where, with comics, it's kind of like you have to um you're telling a story, you have to kind of make everything kind of fit into that box
Yeah.
because 85 years of stories, something else is going to contradict, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
So you kind of just got to go with it sometimes. And yeah, I can go with it. Like it's
Yeah.
not make or break.
So my forcing this into my box as the story went along, I think it did kind of settle that nerve, if you will, of like, oh, he's immortal. I don't like that. I like that Joker just, I do like how he just is. And that's not just because that's what Christopher Nolan said for The Dark Knight. It's like, that's just kind of how I've really enjoyed it. I love 89. 89's Joker has an origin. That's fine. My preference, what I like is that he's mysterious. You don't
Mhm.
know. And I kind of like, I think I wrapped and reading it here too, because that was also imagery that was stuck in my head was like Gordon seeing the pictures of
Yeah.
quote unquote Joker throughout history in Gotham and the Julia too on the facial recognition. But was they like, okay, so they're also hammering home that this Dionysium's been here for how long? So others have maybe somehow been exposed to it in some regard, and there's some kind of others in Gotham have had reactions to it.
Yeah. They say
Kind of
Savage.
looking him. Yeah, they said Savage. Roz, I don't go with it there. My Roz origin is Birth of the Demon by Bray
Yeah.
Fogel and Denny O'Neil.
Hmm.
That's like hold that one close to my heart. Also surprised nobody's picked it. And to me, there's no Dionysium or anything like that in that origin. But for the sake of this story, sure. Like, sure. Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah.
Um, I just feel like others in Gotham have been exposed to it and had a Joker like reaction throughout history. He's just the one that he's got these other ingredients of he's freaking crazy that maybe others didn't have. So it was like easier for me now in rereading it here that I didn't even go down that entertain that thought of like he's immortal.
Yeah.
He's been around for centuries.
And it could be just that crazy quilt just spouting off a bunch of
Yeah,
BS.
that too. And Snyder, I think he plays it to where I think in this I can appreciate from writers of like they provide it to where you can you've got
Yes.
evidence to go whichever direction you want.
Exactly. You don't like it, don't make it part of your head canon.
Yeah.
I've said it for years. Head canon is what you want it to be. Like
Yeah.
comics don't comics canon doesn't make sense as
Period.
is at all. Like you can't do it. So you have to pick and choose what makes sense.
Yeah.
Like we talk about 0 Year. I love year 1 and I love 0 Year. In my head, they both can coexist. I can make them fit somehow. Yes, are there things that contradict? Absolutely there are. But to me, I can make them both work into my head. And it's okay. Like,
Yeah.
am I wrong? Probably, but it's what I felt like, enjoying. So I don't want to not enjoy something because it doesn't fit into canon. I feel like that's a weird cop out. Like I can enjoy something and it still contradicts something else. I can kind of make it work and make it fit to my own benefit. And I'm the one winning in that regard because I get to enjoy two stories that some people might not be able to enjoy because they contradict each other.
Yeah. Uh yeah, it's like it's equating it to the movies. Like
Yeah.
in The Dark Knight, I wasn't like, why isn't this Joker making fart noises, out of his
Yeah.
mouth and dancing with the boombox? Where's
Yeah.
Lawrence? Like, no, it's kind of
It's fine.
similar
Yeah.
similar with comics, unless it's claiming that it is. So The Long Halloween's coming, and it's claiming it's a sequel. Is it was flat out doing stuff that does not follow Dark Victory and Long Halloween,
Exactly.
then it'd be like, well, you're
Yeah.
claiming you're a sequel and you're kind of breaking. Jeff Loeb's not going to do that. He knows
Yeah.
better.
Yeah, it's
Uh,
easier. It's easier to do that when it's different creative teams. When they're the same team is contradicting themselves, it's harder to be okay
yeah.
with that.
What do you think about here? Part of a debate in Death of the Family was also Joker. Does Joker know who Batman is? Here,
Mhm.
Joker flat out knows who
The
Batman
debate is
is.
gone.
How do you
Yeah,
feel about that?
okay. So black and white. Do I like that? If I had to give an answer just based off that, I would say no, I don't like that.
Yeah.
But if I can continue, I would say I
You
like
may
the
continue.
I like the argument of he doesn't care. He's always known, but it's never been an issue. He does not care. Um, I like that he knows, and he doesn't care. He's just there to. He's not going to tell anybody. It's like his own little
Yeah.
secret, and that's what's fun is he can
It's like
torment.
Riddler knowing in Hush.
Yeah, it is kind of that same dynamic, a little bit more, of the insanity of it, but because when he's having the conversation with Dick is like, well, if he knows, it's over. Like we're not,
Yeah.
there's no coming back from that. And Bruce just thinks there's some way around it. I think it's more simple than that. It's just that Joker doesn't care. Like he's not telling anyone because it doesn't matter to him.
For
So
me,
I think they've
go
gone
ahead.
further with it in Joker War with Tynion, right?
Mhm.
It's been a long time since I read that story. I think I just read that when it came out.
I did too.
I've been meaning to actually revisit that. After I read this, that made me want to go and check that one out again. Um, Side note, that hardcover collection is terrible. You can't even read the center spine is so bad on that one. So that's why I haven't read that in a while. I got to read it digitally. But yeah, so what are your thoughts on that? Like, how do you feel about the whole Joker knowing thing? Because I could see it. I could see why people are not okay with it because it's a weird thing.
I feel in a sense how so I think Snyder hinted on it a little bit in Death of the Family. I feel like Joker wouldn't want to know because it would ruin the joke. I
Mhm.
feel like he would find it hilarious that he's fighting Batman night after night, and he, as far as he knows, he could be walking by that guy on a almost on a day-to-day
Mhm.
basis. He would find it hilarious that it's Bruce Wayne,
Yeah.
but he wouldn't want to know that because it ruins the joke. And then I can always hear, Hamill's Joker and BTAS saying about like it's not funny if you have to explain the joke. And
Yeah.
it's like, yeah, that's absolutely true. So that's like my feelings of like an essential part of Joker would be that him. I think what Snyder can use to, if he has to defend his Joker here, is that as you're seeing like now Joker's in a little bit different headspace here in his approach to Batman, and that it's not I'm your biggest fan. It's it's changed. You've changed things forever. He's going after him like this is the end
Yes.
game. Like we're done
That's the whole
here.
point of this story. Is
So
this is not.
therefore, I
Yeah.
do know who you are now, and he's finding a different approach to that joke. And like I know who you are, and you don't know how I'm going to get you now,
Mhm.
because I know who you are.
Yeah.
In which he does prove that in not that everybody knows Bruce Wayne has a cave, but he goes after Alfred again.
Mhm.
Um, and this time I was trying to figure out what this like. I can't say fascination because it's not like it's happened a lot, but the current, Zdarsky, spoiler alert, chopped off Bruce's hand. Alfred's got his right hand chopped off. Like
It's a Star Wars fetish, isn't it? That's.
maybe,
I just remember the Russo
maybe
brothers saying they did that, or was it the Russos or Feige? Something with the Avengers movies, like all of them lost a hand in every movie
yeah.
they did, or something.
And I mean, they should have listened to Robert Kirkman with Walking Dead and how he said he cut off Rick Grimes' hand. He's like, that was a big mistake. I should not have done that.
It was
Like,
yeah,
hey
it was
guys,
really hard to figure
don't.
out how to do that. Yeah.
And so, I mean, cutting off Alfred's hand, I mean, that's something for you to say, like, whoa, this is crazy.
Yeah.
It doesn't factor into the story a whole lot until Alfred's monologue at the very end. And I
Mhm.
think that's written really well. And I think Capullo
rough.
emotes Alfred's face really well, laying
Mhm.
there in the hospital. And there's something even about the line of kind of like there's no one to care for. So it's like I
Yeah.
don't care. I don't need this hand. Like there's nobody to serve anymore. Uh where were we at? We were at about him knowing who Bruce is. So that's just I mean, I can go with it. How you just said of like you can go with it. Yeah, I can totally go with it here. I think it works. It doesn't, it doesn't take a dump on it on Batman history or anything like that.
Yeah.
It's not offensive to the character of Batman and Bruce Wayne. It's like, oh, okay, this is actually one where he does know who he is.
Yeah.
And,
You could
and
argue that's
now,
the joke. It's
yeah,
like I've always known it doesn't matter. Now it matters. Like this is
yeah.
the joke now. Like you didn't think I always knew.
And it's funny to me that you would think about if I knew or not, and I knew the whole time. Like there's different angles, again, different angles he can come at him this time around.
They don't know that we know they know they know.
Yeah, exactly. Well done. Um the big fight in the cave. So, okay, what did I mention? I love the Gordon Joker underneath the bed moment. That's straight
So
out of a
creepy.
horror movie.
Yeah.
Awesome. Pretty striking imagery that when Batman catches up to Gordon, he's got an axe in his chest. But then Gordon's turn, so that's another thing of like ramping the stakes here of like, holy crap. Alfred's lost his right hand. Gordon has an axe in his chest. Oh, now Gordon's got the Joker toxin in him.
Mhm.
The chilling, no pun intended, Batman coming upon Joe Chill, who's infected, and then right next to him is like a recreation of Crime Alley,
Yeah.
which I think is kind of like, whoa, I think I could. And this isn't patting myself on the back. I thought it was very obvious what Snyder was doing with Duke. Like right
Yeah.
here in this story, Duke loses both his parents, and I thought that there was a panel missing because they were all the Duke and his two parents were standing there underneath the street, like the street light, which Capullo makes ballin' street lamps in Gotham. Like they look great, and out of nowhere, it's like all the citizens under Joker toxin just attack, and then something's just missing, and Batman's got Duke, and they're way over here, and Batman's just like, they're gone. We gotta go.
Yeah.
It was like, oh,
Wh-
well, that was fast.
When was Duke introduced? Was he introduced in Eternal? Or one of the issues between Death of the Family and
That is,
this? It's been a long time since
it is a great
I feel like
question.
because it was one of those things where I'm like, oh, Duke was just always part of the New 52, but I don't I obviously he was a Snyder creation. Um, but and we all knew what he was doing as far as like where he was going with him.
Which he'd
But
already
this,
kind of done it with Harper Row in New 52. So I guess I was really surprised, like,
yeah.
oh, you're doing this again? Huh.
So Batman 21, he was an unnamed child. And then yeah, he was introduced in 30.
Okay.
So oh, We Are Robin. I totally forgot about We Are Robin. That's another there were so many like side stories in the Batman world at that time.
I want to say Pete is a big fan of We Are Robin. Was that one that Bermejo did a bit of? I never read
Bermeo
it.
did it. Yep.
Yeah,
Oh,
okay. Pete thinks that that
you
can.
should cut that
You read
out
it?
because I know you're such a big Bermeo fan. I can't believe you
I
admitted that
know.
on the
I
show.
know. And it was he says so okay. So Joe, you've read all of We Are Robin?
I did when it came out. I have the issues, but I haven't read it since.
Okay. Pete swears that it is applicable. It fits my rules for the Batman book club.
Oh
Batman's an
yeah,
important part of
absolutely.
the
I can
story.
see
Is
that.
that true?
Yeah,
Okay.
it's
All right.
if I remember right, the Robins are like a street gang, but it's been a long time since. I mean, that was I don't remember what year that was, but it's been a long time since I read it, and I wasn't crazy about it, um, because it's probably more Batman adjacent than I wanted it to
Sure.
be. But I don't know. It was May of 2015 is when that started. So, and it wasn't long, if I remember right. It was a short little story, but
He his okay, so according to dc.fandom.com, first appearance was in New 52 issue 21, which was during 0 year. And he had
yeah, it
been
says he's
just
just
he
an
was just a little
unnamed
guy.
child at that point. They didn't
Okay.
actually give him a name or anything, but that was the first like thing of him.
Okay. Um, where was I going with all of that? Why did I mention Duke? I said it seemed like it was obvious where he was going with him.
Oh,
I
I
said the
asked you
Joe
like when he
Chill.
was introduced
Oh,
because
okay.
we knew they were doing something with him, but like I couldn't remember if this was the first like major part that he played. It was, I mean, it had to have been the first major part he played in the Snyder Capullo run. If he was doing stuff on the other side issues, I don't remember, but he became a major player after this. He had his own book with the Signal and all that. Plays a major part in the beginning of Metal. So yeah, I don't remember exactly where we were going with that, other than like
I
the
don't
whole
need to. There's Duke Thomas.
The Duke Thomas thing, and we were kind of trying to figure out what happened with Duke Thomas. But
My
yeah,
my favorite Duke Thomas is White Knight, like White Knight series.
yeah,
John
yep,
Murphy
I
knew
can
what
see
he was
that.
doing with Duke Thomas. Not saying Snyder didn't. I liked his the most. But I haven't read We Are Robin, and maybe that'll. It's not like I'm a not. It's not like I don't like him, but he's not a draw. I'm like, oh my gosh, the Signal. Oh my gosh, Duke Thomas. It's just
Well, like
like,
you said,
where's
we
Batman?
got Harper Row before
Yeah,
that, and then we get Duke, and it's like, okay, like we can tell what you're doing. You're trying to push these characters, and I don't even mean that in a negative way, where it's like, oh, how dare he try to push
I
these new
do.
characters on us? But like, yeah, it's like, it's obvious. We know what you're doing. It's all right. But
Mm,
in this case with this story, I thought I remembered more to the whole thing with his parents,
mhm.
with saving him. I thought there was a lot more to it than
I
just,
did too, and
so
it was
maybe
brief.
that's takes place later or in one of the other side
Yeah,
stories. Maybe it takes place in We Are Robin. I don't remember. You said you never
yeah,
read We Are Robin, so I don't know.
correct. I
Maybe
do.
Batman
I
and
thought,
Robin Eternal. Does Duke play a big part in Batman and Robin Eternal? Let's just keep looking things up. It's great
dang it.
for
Let's talk about
podcast.
all of the 2010s Batman-ish
Oh,
titles and
okay. And then
issues.
there was Robin War. I mean, there was a lot of Robin stuff going on at the time that was like just all these Robins together. Um, so yeah, we could whatever.
I don't know.
Let's kick back and
Uh,
punt on Duke Thomas. So Duke
yeah.
played a good part here, and so what else?
So Duke Thomas, yeah. Joe Chill and who else we got? There's because I was going to jump to the end, and then I was like, wait. And I want to mention like that was a cool like the Gordon parts, like those were cool. It was the Crime Alley
Mhm.
set, if
Yeah,
you
like the
will,
reenactment. Yeah,
was cool. I mean, it's great imagery and coloring and stuff for when the Crazy Quilt. I mean, crazy naked guy in a quilt, but like that outlines is like the
yeah.
noirish looking when he's falling to the
Oh
people
yeah,
below. All that's really good. And then of course Joker Parade, like how freaking brilliant that he breaks into the cave and he's flattered, which I think is also a really great point that that Snyder
yeah,
hits on is that Joker goes in and sees like Batman's monuments in a sense, and he's just like, oh, you kept it, and it's
yeah.
the Red Hood from Zero Year, the Joker card itself and stuff. And so then he takes that and the T-Rex, and it's straight
This
out of
Joker put in
89
some work.
influence. Yeah, it's straight out of 89 influence of doing a Joker parade. And I just think that that's great.
But yeah, when you
Uh,
think about like him building a set of Crime Alley,
mhm.
doing all this stuff, then
Yeah,
he somehow gets all this stuff out of the cave. Don't try to think about it too much because it's almost like
he
how.
just did. Okay, he's the Joker.
Just yeah. It's the it's the he's Batman
Yeah, exactly.
uh
I was just gonna say actually, like
but
Batman does
the
stuff because he's Batman. Joker does stuff because he's Joker. They
but yeah, I
just
don't even
do.
care how little sense it makes. That parade is so cool. The imagery on that is awesome.
Yeah.
He just disassembled everything real quick, put it on a boat, and then just got it out of there somehow.
and
But
and then Batman, it's like whatever he's got to do to catch the Joker. Also, like I just feel like there's moments of of the Dark Knight that Snyder took as an influence because I just hear things and talking with you about this, and I hear like a line from that Dark Knight, and like when Batman and tells Lucius in the Dark Knight, like I've got to stop this man, Lucius.
yeah,
And so what's Batman do here? Like he gets the villains, like other villains,
yeah,
to meet up at Ace, um and he's like we gotta stop this guy, so
yeah.
here's masks and let's go get him. And so then yeah, Batman and his allies are joining up with other rogues gallery members all to take out people in Gotham City. And then it's
Playing
a
on the
really
ego
great,
of villains.
yeah, and then there's a it's a great twist of And I think the reasoning for it, and I'm glad that, and this is where I'm glad that Snyder included the explanation, because he kept it like short and brief and like to the point, and it was like, yeah, I didn't even think about that, and I forgot about it here. Is that when Batman goes to attack Joker and Joker takes him out and his mask explodes and takes it off, and he's like, Dick Grayson, Dick Grayson or Nightwing, whatever he says, realizes that it's not Bruce. That is an important factor now that Joker knows who Batman is. Otherwise, that
Yes.
wouldn't have mattered at all.
Good point. Very good point.
But then Bruce says, I think he's talking to Julius, he's in the caves, and he's just like, if Batman wasn't going to Joker, he knows something was up and he'd blow the caves or he'd come find me.
Yeah.
So at least gives Batman like a head start. And I thought that
Mhm.
was really cool, to where Batman finds the Dionysium well, pool, whatever you want to call it. And then yeah, this is one of like the most brutal fights between
Mhm.
Batman and Joker. Like in the stories I've ever read. Because a lot of times there is like, if Joker doesn't have, a gag or have a toy, he can't go, toe to toe with Batman very long.
Mhm.
And man, here it's just a brutal, just taking each other. I thought it was so clever of the stabbing, like two knives in Batman's back
And the
after he's
smiley
already
face.
cut him, and it's just a big smiley face.
Yeah.
But like you'd say a Joker smiley face, because it's the red lips and then the
Mhm.
the green on the knife sticking out, or like the Joker makeup, and it's like, well, that's a nice touch.
It's
As
corny and
Garfield would
cheesy, and I
say,
don't
nice
care.
touch. What's that?
I said it's corny and cheesy, and I don't care.
I don't
It's
care at
just
all.
an
No.
awesome image, and
Yep.
it's funny. You were talking before, about like, Gordon being attacked by the Joker, and then you got Alfred. There are a lot of parallels with this, what I never really thought about from Death of the Family. I mean,
Mhm.
you got Gordon. Remember, gets attacked in Death of the Family with the he starts like bleeding in his apartment. There's
Oh
the
yeah.
the two of
Yeah.
them are in the apartment, and then you have Joker going to attack Alfred at the Wayne Manor. Here you have him attacking Alfred at the Batcave, and then you got the big battle at the end.
Yeah.
So a lot of parallels where it's just amped up a little bit in this story. Everything is just one up from the last one, because it's you know
Yeah.
he's not messing around this time. It's not a love relationship thing. It's a hate relationship, like you said. On the nose, it is what it is. But I do love, like you were saying about them fighting. He goes out of his way to say like, "Oh, I forgot how fast he was," and
Hmm.
because we don't think
Yeah.
about them going toe to toe a lot, and so he's putting it in the story about how yes, Joker is a formidable fighter, whether we think about him that way or not. Um, the whole thing about, have I always been this fast? Have I been letting up to make you think I wasn't this fast, but I have been? Or is it the Dionysium that's now kicking in? Or a lot of cool little again, it's exposition, but it works to make you think about what's going on in the story.
Yeah.
And yeah, that fight is brutal. There is just red everywhere on these images. I mean, there is no way around it. It is, you know, the card in the face. Um,
Card in the face, batarang in the other face.
yeah, I mean,
Half
it
of
is.
Joker's face is seems like, gosh, oh, because Joker, he grabs one of like, because he set off, some of his explosives, and he even grabs some of the burning rock and
Mhm.
smashes Batman's face with it, so it's burning. And meanwhile, Batman just keeps punching his face and blood everywhere, and it's just like, good Lord.
Yeah,
Like, man.
yeah.
And Bruce still
Like,
has all of his teeth.
can we stop pretending that this stuff has any realistic factor whatsoever when we
Yeah,
come to like, you know?
yeah, exactly. I like it though. I like
Oh
that
yeah.
it's so like ruthless. And I mean, even one of the pages is just like them fighting. There's one small panel where Joker is like huff, huff, Batman's like huff, huff, and
Yep.
then they go right at each other again
Mhm.
and just knock each other like down and out, and it's just like blood everywhere and stuff. And it's like, I don't like, you guys, you understood the assignment. Like this
They
is
wanted
Endgame,
a
and you're
climax.
believing it. Like, jeez Louise, this is, everything's burning. There's fire, blood, and my goodness, it's just, it's well done. And then yeah, one of the stalactites, what a word, falls on Joker's back and puts him down. So then they're just sitting there and bleeding. And I really do like, I think out of context, it could be misconstrued of Batman's dialogue here as Joker's trying to crawl to the Dionysium and Batman's sitting there like, I need to, I need to tell you something. I need to tell you. I finally believe you. And I interpreted it as like he has an end game here. This isn't like Bruce lets down the walls and he's like, I'm being totally honest now. It's like, no, he has a
Yeah.
game here. You know
Yeah.
what he's doing. And this is like to actually see the Joker here on this part of like he's actually panicking. I don't need
Yes.
that from Joker like hardly ever. But I think it worked here,
Agree.
like you actually
Completely
had
agree.
him like, no, sort of it's not so funny to him. It's like they flipped the script a little bit, and Batman's almost the one having the quote unquote fun with it. But it works really well.
And like, I don't know about you. I mean, I would assume the same. Most of the time when I read any type of Batman story with the Joker, I'm hearing Mark Hamill, and it reminds me of BTAS, where like there is an episode, if I remember correctly, where like he's worried he's going to die and he's panicking at the last second. That's what I'm
Mm,
hearing in my head when I'm reading this book, and it's so much fun to see Joker panic like that. And so I take this as Snyder admitting that the Joker is full of crap. Like he knows the Dionysium is not working. He's going to die, and he's panicking because he needs to get back to it or get out of there or whatever. And this is Batman basically calling him out on his bullshit.
yeah.
So I like this dynamic here. And you could take it that way. That's how I take it. You could take it a different way if you don't like it that way. To me, that's what he's saying in this issue, though, is he's not really immortal. He's panicking right now. Um, and Batman's calling him out on it.
Hmm. And so I kind of forget Julia's whole her story up to this point and her inclusion.
Mm-hmm.
It's pretty rusty with me. She was kind of like a okay, I guess, but I'm glad that she was kind of a little bit at a distance too.
Mm-hmm.
It she popped up a little in here where it was like, okay, that's a little convenient, but also I guess it works in the context of the story. Uh, but I like how, here basically she's the one that Batman's talking to like to basically save Gotham, telling her what to do, and she's turning back, no, not without you. And he's like, Julia, just take it up. And then it's all like, I'm just going to rest here a little while with my friend.
Yeah.
Um, that's another thing too of I don't know how others respond to it, but for me, it just kind of does work because it is like the Batman, the Batman Joker relationship. It's almost just like, I don't know. You just, if you know, you know, like between the two and how it
Yeah.
does just work on like, no, they're arch enemies for a reason, but yet somehow are just drawn to each other too. And so
Yeah.
it's just poetic that they're just even like opposites of like they're laying down, Batman's face up, Joker's face down. Like
Yeah.
it's just symbolic of like them, period. They're just they're always opposites.
Yeah. And like when he says it, he's just saying it tongue in cheek. Like,
Hmm.
it's sarcasm or however you want to take it. He's just saying like, yeah, my pain in the ass friend here. I gotta take a rest real quick. And
Yeah. Like what
it's
would Batman say? Like, Julia, help me. I don't want to
yeah.
die. No, he wouldn't
I
do
also
that.
want to mention that the callback to the orb from Zero Year was really cool to use that for this. I don't know how much you remember of that
I
from
need to
Zero Year.
revisit Zero Year.
Yeah,
It's
so the
the last
orb is
time I
the
read it
callback
was
from his.
when
He
from
actually says it
here.
in the story is it was a gift from his father for from Zero Year. That's how they actually
I'll,
scanned the cave
I'll probably
originally.
wait till I get the absolute though to revisit it.
Yeah,
I'll be like,
yeah.
I can hold on for 6 months or whatever.
But I also want to touch on what you were saying about Julia. Most of Snyder and Capullo's run up until this point, you can just read Snyder and Capullo's stuff and get
Yeah.
the major gist of the
Yep.
story. Even after this with Metal and everything, like yeah, there are tie-ins with Metal, and then you got even the Justice League run. It's pretty expansive, but most of the stuff stays. You get all the information you need from the story.
Hmm.
This one, it seems like, is the only one where like when you start reading it, you have to figure out where we are. Like, where's the starting point? Like, where is this coming from? Like, why does he have bruised ribs? Why does,
Yeah.
where is this Duke kid coming from? Where is Julia coming from? And I don't remember if they were in those few little issues in between Death of the Family and Zero
Yeah.
Year, and then there's an issue or two after. And that could be my mistake, and they are included in those. I don't remember, but they're
There's
not part of any main stories.
it's worth like looking at going back
Hmm.
through again because there was, I think, issue 18 and 19 maybe was like a
Hmm.
two-part Clayface story that was
Yeah, I
pretty
remember
cool.
that. Yep.
And then there's, yeah, like issue 34, like when I was just looking through these, so the issue before Endgame was like a standalone, but I forget now what that one was. But like I should just go through and just pick, cherry pick a couple of the random before, in
Yeah, and those are the
betweens.
ones that are obviously less memorable because we
Yeah.
know the main stories. And I actually applaud them for doing those short one-off stories, or
Yeah.
just two parts. Even a six-part story like this, like we don't even really get those anymore. Everything's so expansive all the time. So it's nice that they were able to do these, shorter Joker stories. But yeah, I mean, I the ending of this, it set up the whole thing with Super Heavy, obviously. But
Yeah.
what's your take on the ending?
I like it. Again, it's a lot of just Alfred talking, but I mean, he's got some great lines. Like I said here, Julia says, and I know this isn't what you'd like to talk about, but your hand, they've managed to preserve it until now. But if you don't, and then Alfred, you can see as he turns over on his side and he says,
Hmm.
no, there's no one to mend anymore. I know we just talked about that like 10 minutes ago or whatever, but I think that's done really well. And then the
Yeah.
next page is a close up panel that Capullo just nails. And then it's just kind of like Alfred talking about Batman, and I even wrote it down that I really enjoy this quote that he says. It's the thing that Bruce knew to be true about Batman more than anything else. The thing we all know deep down, but don't like to admit that the story of Batman is and will always will be a tragedy. And I'm like, that's good. That's good stuff. Because it's true. I feel like
Yeah.
that's a Batman story is it's built in tragedy and when it's done, it's done very, very well. Like the ending of the Dark Knight is, it's so good, and it's like, and at the end he's like pinned as a villain,
Yeah.
and it's like, but the whole movie's so good, and it's like, but it is kind of a tragedy in that whole movie. Like Nolan's even said of his trilogy, he's surprised how much people love the Dark Knight because he feels that's by far the coldest movie of the three
Hmm.
movies,
Yeah.
and and so it's just like I don't know, there is something that I do think the best Batman stories, The Long Halloween, like that's the tragedy of Harvey Dent,
Hmm.
but it's like it's my favorite Batman story. It's one of the best Batman stories ever. It's just there's so much truth I think in that little line there that I love it. And then it's symbolic. I had to go back on that last panel, which I knew it was like as the janitor's cleaning up the Royal Theater,
Hmm.
which opened up Endgame, and we got the story about the guy. He wanted it to seem so real that a god came from the sky to whatever. And I think it's just getting symbolic through that. I don't
Hmm.
think it hit it as well as
Hmm.
Snyder maybe thinks he did, or maybe I'm just dumb. That's my
Hmm.
default. I'm a little dumb. But then I did like that the last, the note that Bruce left or whatever that the Pennyworth saw just had one word and it was "ha," which was what was at the end
Yeah.
of Death of the Family.
Hmm.
Well, that's a nice touch. What do you think of the end?
I like it. I mean, it's one of those things where like we all know he's not gonna be gone forever.
He's coming back.
But I kind of was shocked that they didn't hint that he was coming back at the
Mm-hmm.
end.
Yeah.
Usually you get like some random tease, or you'll see like a figure walking away and it's like, oh, was that Bruce? That kind of thing. Um, which like they kind of tease it like, oh, is this supposed to be Bruce or this and that? But it's not. It's just a janitor and he's cleaning up, and like you said, it's the symbolism towards that. Yeah, I will say the ending is a little. I think the ha is a good touch, but I think I'm with you that the symbolism of the armor in the dumpster isn't quite as um doesn't hit home as well as it could have, because by that point
Yeah.
I probably forgot about the
Yeah.
first part of the book. It's not as memorable. I wish it could have been something a little bit more memorable, but it's fine. Like when you read it
Yeah.
like this, it's fine.
It's
At
fine.
the time, I probably had no idea what they were alluding to at all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Same. Like I'm like I remember seeing that, but what's the tie? And it's like I went back to the beginning and read that
Yeah.
again for this time, and then to here, and I was like, that's all right. The Ha's good. So,
Yeah.
are there any points before we move into some favorites that we didn't touch on that you wanted to?
I don't think so. I think
Okay.
I think we hit on everything.
We talked we talked every arc in New 52. We talked Batman
We talked a
movies.
lot of random nonsense other than this book.
We took some detours, but hey, it's
Made
all
a
good.
list of other stuff I need to read before I, get to the
Yeah,
other stuff I need to read.
I got some homework to do. I got to revisit some things. All right, Joe, then let me go ahead and ask you a couple questions.
Yes, you've got a question?
First off, what was your favorite part of Endgame?
Oh, my favorite part. I was trying to remember all your questions.
Oh boy.
Favorite part is probably the surprise. It's
Okay.
the easy answer, but it is the surprise. Like that's what I think of when I think of Endgame. Which is weird because it's such a small part of the actual story,
Mm-hmm.
but I think it was such an impactful thing for me reading this story for the first time that that will always be what I think of when I think of this book. So I think the reveal of the Joker being the big bad for this story is my favorite part. So I don't know if that means
Okay.
like that final panel is my favorite part. Um, but just the essence of that is my favorite part.
Nice. I'll come up with something different. It's almost like could almost play as like a three-part, act, but Gordon, because I just think it is flat out horror story with him
Yeah.
of his first talking with Batman and then his looking at the pictures and he hears something and so he checks the closet and I think isn't the fist pops out of the closet.
Yeah.
I think, and then yeah, because then he's laying on the ground, and then you just see the glowing eyes underneath the bed in the dark
Hmm.
as Joker talks, and then next time Batman sees him, the axe in the chest, and it's just like all of it's creepy as hell, and I'm like, oh, this is great, this is horror movie stuff.
It
So yeah,
100%. And I
Joker's
love
my
that he
favorite.
finds a way to
Yeah,
put
go ahead.
Gordon in these stories. Because like it's
Includes
not
him, yeah.
yeah, because you could very easily not include Gordon in this story because there's not a lot of street level stuff that he might be involved in or it's worth putting him in. But this is where the Joker making it personal is an easy way to put
Hmm.
Gordon into it.
And it's like in a way of it can explain and show us of like, well, where's Gordon? Why isn't Gordon involved? It's like
Yeah,
here,
take
here's
him
a
off the
here
table.
we can make Joker more threatening and take Gordon off the table. And he did it like in a very what do you want to say? Like
Organic.
yeah, it was organic and like in a quick amount of time, it hit the points that he needed to where it's just like, well, it makes total sense. It worked totally well. It kept for me the momentum going. Perfect.
That actually
Uh,
reminds me of a point that
mhm,
I wanted to make, but I didn't earlier, is that the first issue, yes, it's a fun way to battle the Justice League,
mhm.
but there's a reason it gets the Justice League off the table. So when the actual huge events at the end of this story are happening, he can't call the Justice League. He has to resort to the Bat Family and the villains. So it makes it a Batman centric story.
Which, in my argument, it should be because it's Batman.
Exactly.
Um, Favorite panel. Oh yeah, yeah.
It's a
What do you
it's a
got?
cop out, but it's the Superman
Superman.
Jokerized. It has to be. Like, yeah, that was the easy one. If I had to pick a number two, it would be that smiley face on the back of the Joker. Um, but for me, it's
You talk the on the back of Batman, like the
I'm sorry, yeah,
fight.
the back of
That
Batman,
one.
the
Okay,
Joker,
gotcha.
yeah,
Yeah,
the
yeah,
two
yeah.
knives and the smiley face. But it has to be the Superman Jokerized because there's just
Nice.
nothing more memorable about this book.
I think again, and I know like we kind of hit a little bit, but I mean sometimes also with art, what can you say? Like Capullo, he's awesome. His work is great. Um, yeah, he did a great job. issue 2, the full page, You Miss Me, when Eric Border becomes the Joker. And we see the
Okay.
Joker returning, that look, and
Mhm.
it's like in the like the hazy smoke kind of
Yeah.
stuff too, and all that. I'm like, that's my favorite image. That's a great Capullo Joker. I dig it. And he's really dressed up in a suit and tie, and I always appreciate that, looking like a gentleman. Joe, would you like to see Endgame adapted in animation?
Yeah, I mean, I think I would prefer Death of the Family first.
Uh-huh.
Because I think this does work as a follow-up to that. I don't know if you could put the two of them together in one story. I think that'd be a little too much. But yeah, if we got Death of the Family first and this was like a sequel to that, I think this would work really well. Or if you somehow combine the two stories, maybe, and like did a loose adaptation, kind of like
Hmm.
how Under the Red Hood takes Death in the Family and Under the Red Hood and kind of streamlines it and makes it
Yeah,
its own story. I would love to see something like that, where you kind of make
it's
your own
cool.
story out of those two stories, keep us guessing, do your own thing. Because I think straight adaptation of this would be a little wonky, but
To get him to the point of hate, he has to have enough time of love to feel and understand the betrayal.
mhm,
So let's use, man, okay, let's say episode 1, season 1, it just like dropped. Caped Crusader was Batman and Joker.
mhm.
This show goes 7 seasons, and we get him sprinkled out
Yeah.
where he is adoring Batman anytime he pops up.
Mhm.
By season 7, it becomes a big end game. Like, nope, it's like
Yeah.
we've done the time to invest that by
This is
now,
the
like,
finale.
oh, you can hit it here. Like, you can hit it at home. You
Yeah.
could do a really good job. So, therefore, in a cartoon series, that's how I would like to see it. In a movie, it's like, I don't know, because Gunn apparently said that with the DCU, the animated is going to be building as well, so it's going to be another long storyline. You got to have Death of the Family and then Time,
Mhm.
then Endgame for
Yeah.
me. So if they can do it, that's if yeah. So like to answer the question is yes, but there's like such a caveat to it because it's
Yeah.
not standalone. It is reliant on their relationship being established
Yeah.
to be able to get to this point where this is more effective.
Yeah. That's why I related to Under the Red Hood because I love that movie so
Yeah.
much. That movie relies on a history and they
Hmm.
find a way to make it work. So I think you have to add stuff to it or work and tinker with it a little bit to make
I
it
like
work,
that
but I
comic
think you
book
could.
story, and they made the movie better somehow.
Right? Yeah, they
It's
did.
amazing, and it's the same guy. It's blown my
Yeah.
mind ever since I saw the movie the first time. I was
Yep.
like, Judge Winnick, you son of a bitch. Let's see, Joe. What's your final thoughts on Endgame?
It's another solid entry in the Snyder Capullo run. I don't think every single entry that they did was a home run, but their
Hmm.
run was just consistent entertainment for me. And the surprise was what I will always remember. I don't think this is as good as Death of the Family. This is probably the one I think I might have said it already. This is probably the one I revisit the least when it
Mm,
comes to their run. Well, I shouldn't say the least because it's a quick story, so I probably revisit more than Zero Year. Um, and Super Heavy I kind of put on its own.
yeah,
But it's it's up there with the rest of them. It's just not quite as good. Um, it's an ambitious, crazy story. Like the ending is a little bit much for me. I like the more intimate angle of Death of the Family, I think.
yeah.
I prefer that story.
Hmm.
But to counteract that with this crazy sequel and an ending to the Joker Batman story, if you want to believe it is that, um, it's where, that's the downside to comics always continuing.
Yeah.
Um, if you wanted to take this as an ending and pretend like nothing else happens, would this be a satisfactory ending to the Batman story? I think it could be, yeah. We just
Hmm.
know it's not because
Hmm.
comics have to keep going.
Comics go on forever.
And then you get the brilliant Last Night on Earth to, cap that off.
Or, damn
So,
you, Eric Carter.
and I actually like that story. I think it's a fun story. I just know you don't like it, so I had to bring that
Yeah.
up. So yeah, it's one of those things where with comics you can't necessarily have a complete ending, especially in the main title like this was. So, it's again, it's a fun story, and I think that's what I had so much fun reading the New 52 when it was coming out. They could do no wrong in my eyes when that run was happening. That was what got me back into comics. This story was right in the middle of it. Um, and I do have such a affinity for the way they did the Joker because he was such a huge part of everything. So it's hard for me to say like it's hard for me to talk about this story without talking about their run as a
Yeah.
whole and Death of the Family and even Zero Year, which planted seeds to this. So I do have a soft spot for the story, even though it isn't one of my favorites from them. But it doesn't have to be. Like it's
Yeah.
okay to just have a good story. It doesn't have
Yeah.
to be. It's not love it or hate it.
Remember, it's the whole like it's either the best or it's the worst.
Yup.
There's no in between.
There's
It's like
no in
actually,
between.
there's a lot of most things are in between, but
And the
that's
beauty
okay.
of this being prior to when I was really into Twitter and all that crap, then
Hmm.
I didn't have everyone telling me this was a bad story or this was the best story ever. So I just took it as it was.
Yeah. I think this is a good story. I think you could, if you wanted to, like, you could make this as a capper to a Batman Joker story.
Hmm.
And it would totally, like, it could totally work because, like, Snyder at least leaves it of kind of like the last time you see them, they're both alive, and it's not like caves are like you see that panel coming to collapse and smash
Hmm.
them. It's like you see them there, and then we move on. So it's kind of open ended. You can
Yeah.
kind of just take your mind where you want to
Yep.
with it. And so, like, I think albeit a few moments didn't hit as well as I would like them to. Overall, like you just said, I do think it's a good story. I like this story. There's relief in revisiting the story, as I already said. It's it definitely is a good job on Snyder and Capullo's part of, building upon their Batman run, and things that they've established being included here and it working well because it's been set up and these are nice payoffs
Hmm.
and inclusions. So yeah, I think it's a really good story. I think it's a fun story. I think it's a, moments. It's like a scary story. Uh, it's a good one. I think somebody had posted or commented in Batman Book Club on Twitter when I posted something. They said this was like an underrated one. I know. I think you mentioned that. I mentioned it's not talked about a lot and brought up. That doesn't necessarily mean there's tons of stuff that's not brought up that's good, but um, it deserves to be brought up. It's a good story. Like it flat out, it's a good story.
Yeah.
Um,
If it wasn't
I don't
Snyder
know.
and Capullo and it was written by someone else, we might hold it in higher regard because we wouldn't compare it to Snyder and Capullo's other work. It's almost like that's going
True.
against it is it's smack dab in the middle of this awesome run where we loved everything they did. It just doesn't live up to that hype, I guess.
It's not as good as Court of Owls. Well, it's like,
Therefore, it is the
well,
worst thing
no
ever. Yeah,
shit. Like, there's
yeah,
so much that isn't as good as Court of Owls.
exactly.
Um, but yeah, it's a good chapter in the Batman Joker biography. Um, Joe, that'll do it. Thanks for bringing the Joker back to the Batman Book Club. Why don't you go ahead and plug away anything and everything, whatever you want.
Yeah, well, so thank you again for having me on. I still can't believe it was this long.
I
And
know.
now
Oh
I got
goodness.
now I got to start thinking about what else what I can come back and talk about now that we did both of these. So
I'll talk to you in
I'm trying to
2030.
yeah, I got time. I got time. My kids will be in high school. It'll be nice.
There you go.
Uh, so, so now you guys can, if anyone wants to find me, I'm on Twitter, Twitter, Instagram, and Letterboxd as jforn11, and I am obviously on the Fire Rises with Eric Carter, a Batman podcast. I always say the name wrong, so I'm hoping I'm not screwing that up. It's TFR Bat Pod, I believe, on Twitter and Instagram. I think he's on Threads too. So yeah, we cover like just any type of topic we want to cover at that moment. We don't do news or anything like that. We've done some look backs at some anniversaries and stuff like that, which has been a lot of fun. We did cover Batman the Caped Crusader recently on our last episode. That was a lot of fun. Just the first 3 episodes. We're trying to pace ourselves through it. He finished it recently. I still have a few episodes left, but that was a lot of fun to cover that. So that's where you guys, if you want to follow me, that's where you can find me. And thank you again for having me on, Ryan. This was a lot of fun.
Yeah, absolutely. So I can talk spoilers with him.
Yes.
Okay, there we go. For the Batman Book Club, follow on social medias at the Batman BC. It's not as active lately because I've been busy, but yeah, go there for latest episode drops and upcoming episodes. Sometimes some giveaways. Make sure to subscribe to the Batman YouTube channel because Pete and I know I've been saying this I think for 8 months now. Pete and I are going to dive into the No Man's Land omnibus, but it's going to happen. I've got the book on the shelf. It's going to happen. And we're gonna make our way through that, and that's gonna be a lot of fun because we had a lot of fun with the road to No Man's Land when we went through that. Let's see. If you want to support the show, there's a variety of ways you can do that. Patreon.com/the Batman BC, tpublic.com, and type in TBBC for the Batman Book Club. But easiest, quickest, most impactful thing you can do to help this show is rate and review it. So however you listen to your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, Amazon, iHeartRadio, just go to the rate and review page and rate and review the show. The more reviews the show gets, the more it helps spread the word. And as you, me, and Joe, and even old Eric Carter know, that word is panic. So, for Joe Fornarotto, I am Ryan Lauer. And until next time, remember, Nicholas.